Well, good evening, and thank you for coming tonight. My name is Phil Schomber. I'm the adult programmer for the Hedberg Public Library, and we're excited to have the band members from Mourning Days with us. They've got a long and rich history that they've compiled in the book. Mourning Days, a Wisconsin garage band, rockin' since 1965. And if you haven't had a chance to get a copy, they'll be available after the program for purchase, and members of the band will be available to sign it. And if you do the math, if they've been rocking since 1965, they've been around for more than 50 years. That's a long time. And in addition to playing who knows how many bars throughout Rock County, they were also the house band for the Alpine Valley Lounge. And that gave them the opportunity. They were the house band for 25 years, and that gave them lots of opportunities to meet the artists that came to play at the main amphitheater there. So as you can imagine, they've got lots of stories, and they're going to share many of those with us tonight. So without further ado, let me turn it over to one of the founders of the band, Rick Pfeiffer.
Hey. Oh, so glad you came tonight to hear our story, and we're looking forward to it. Our band has a long history of being connected with Janesville. Before I begin, let me introduce who we've got with us tonight. On the far left, that's Doug Henry. Doug is one of the founding members of the band. And next to Doug is Risa, my sister. Risa joined the band about 40, we don't talk about that.
She's only 32.
Yeah, Doug and I played together for 5 years, and then a couple years after that, Risa joined the band, which we'll talk about. How'd she ever come to join the band anyway? And her husband, Jerry, who likes to proclaim that he's the world's oldest roadie. Yeah, so one of the things, I think one of the reasons we're here is because of our connection with Janesville. We've played in Janesville an awful lot throughout the years. When earlier on we were playing at the Left Guard, the Red Lion, Ken's Club, the Log Cabin, the Evergreen, the Hoffman House.
Meadows?
Pardon?
The Meadows?
The Meadow, yeah. Yeah, which Gensler's Roadhouse. Yeah, we were the house band, and we'll talk about this. It's interesting. We played at Gensler's 6 nights a week for 3 summers in a row, June, July, and August. 6 nights a week we played there, and it was a great gig. A lot of fun. We really enjoyed that. Before we played at Gensler's, we worked with the Ken Adamating agency, and we had to audition for Ken. Some of you know Ken, and we had an audition at Isabel's Tropical Ballroom. I don't know if any of you remember Isabel's Tropical Ballroom, but we had to audition there for Isabel. And I'll never forget it because Isabel was a very charming lady. You know, probably had her heyday in the 40s and 50s. And she dressed the part, and she would get so mad at us because she would say, "Will you guys turn down because my hearing aid's feeding back?" She would just get furious with us. But here we are auditioning for this big agent, you know. We wanted to do our best, you know, and being loud was part of the deal that we were trying to promote. I want to talk a little bit about growing up as a band member in 1965. And if you hear our band today, or if you've heard it throughout its 50 years, you'll hear that we play a wide variety of music. And you might wonder, well, how did that ever happen? You know, why don't they just stick to one thing? Why don't they just do a couple styles? But they're kind of all over the map. And part of that reason is because of the time in life that we grew up. And you look at the Billboard 100, music was all over the place on the charts. When you turned on the radio, you could hear James Brown 1 minute, and the song after that could be Tammy Wynette singing "Stand By Your Man," and after that, Paul Marriott, you know, playing one of those beautiful instrumental tunes. music was all over the place, and we got to hear it. There was, I brought a Billboard 100 from 1965, and the songs are unbelievable. The #1 tune that year was Wooly Bully. Check that out. I mean, we all know that. But there, Petula Clark, Downtown, The Beatles, Help, Elvis, Crying in the Chapel, The Temptations, My Girl, Beach Boys, Help Me Rhonda, Roger Miller, King of the Road, Mel Carter, Hold Me, Thrill Me, I Got You, Babe, Sonny and Cher, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, This Diamond Ring, Ramsey Lewis, The In Crowd. You don't hear instrumentals much on the music, on the radio these days. The McCoys, Hang On Sloopy, Barry Maguire, Eva Destruction, Tom Jones, What's New Pussycat? On and on. The variety was unbelievable, and the quality was great. I mean, those songs are still standards today. If we talk about what are the top 10 tunes of 2017, we all might be scratching our head a little bit saying, I'm not really sure I know of any songs that were released in 2017. But that was one thing that impacted our band, because we never felt we couldn't do anything. I felt, it's music. If we can do it and we enjoy it, we can share that love, hopefully, with our audience. And that's where that came from, rather than just say, well, I just listen to heavy metal. Well, I don't, man. I listen to death metal. That's what I'm into, or I'm into this kind of rap. Or I'm into this. It wasn't really that segmented. Oh, in places it was, but not as a rule. We've always been pretty open to a wide variety of music. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was the sense of community that occurred back in that time when we were growing up. We had record shops. Records were still a big deal. We could go down to our 5 and 10 cent store, and they had a shelf full of 45s, and you could pull one of those off and put it on the record player there, and you could listen to it before you bought the darn thing, which is pretty cool. And then if you did buy the record, you took that record home, and you probably shared it with somebody. You said, hey, listen to this. And there was a sense of community there. Oh, look, I bought this record. You did? Oh, let me hear it. And you listened together. You didn't listen in headphones, you listened to it together. When the Beatles, like Sgt. Pepper, came out, chances are some of you guys might have gotten together with somebody, and you had a party one night. We're going to get together and listen to this album. And you remember those things. And those things, they last, they go deep, and it's a wonderful sense of community that those things can develop. So, local bands. Being a local band back then, part of the fascination with being a local band, other than wanting to be Elvis Presley or the Beatles, I thought I was going to be the next Ricky Nelson. I thought my first name gave me a start. But local bands were a big deal, because I think local bands kind of brought the big stage to the local community. You could share these experiences you were hearing about in New York, Chicago, LA, but you could bring that experience to your hometown. And that live performance was a big deal for people in that community, not only because you had your friends and your neighbors playing in a band, but because they were trying to bring this new attitude, this bit of social change. They were bringing it to your community. For some people, it was a bit scary, because these guys were doing all this stuff that some people didn't care too much about. But for others, it was pretty exciting, because it was new and different. Okay, I wanted to set that up a little bit. Now I want to turn it over to Doug, the original guitar player in the band, and kind of talk about why the book, why we ever write a book, and how that ever happened, and what would it take to get this book off the ground. So we'll turn it over to Doug.
Thanks, Rick.
You bet, Doug.
Before this shot came on here, we had the DVD, which is in the back of the book. It's a 2.5-hour DVD. So if you do purchase the book, that comes with it. And so basically, it's the Mourning Days then and now. I'm then, and Risa and Rick are now. And when Rick's talking about all the different music that they played, to this day they're playing Bruno Mars and Adele and some Bob Marley and some just a mixture of everything, and which is really great. It's fun to go and listen to them. But so the band started in 1965 in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and in 1968 we made a 45 record called Fly My Paper Airplane. Are you going to keep up with me, Rick? Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Should I move over this way?
Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so that was 1968, and that's a little part of it here on that. We were playing it, and we also have the on the CD, which we'll talk about a little bit also. So we were able to. We recorded that in Chicago, Illinois, at Michigan Avenue at Sound Studios, which is a big-time recording place back then. And if you remember, if you're old enough, like we are, Crying Shames and the Buckinghams and groups like that, which are they're still around actually, recorded there also. So our producer happened to be also of this 45, Fly My Paper Airplane, also was a disc jockey in Davenport, Iowa. So he was able to get our song up to number 9 on the Midwest local charts, which I don't know how far they went, but probably not too far at that time. So we, it helped us get a lot of bookings. And what's so neat about tonight and being here in Janesville is the Ken Adamany story. And I probably could still find his office in his house. I know it's off the road between Old 26 or 26 or whatever it is now, between Milton and here.
Town Hall Road.
There we go. And we would pick up our contracts from Ken Adamany, and he would send us on our way. And so, but we would crisscross with some other groups that started at the same time. And one of my favorite stories, and I'm not getting off the track, I'm going to get back to the book thing here, but one of my favorite stories is there were 4 groups at the time that started together. Boss Skaggs was there because he used to play guitar with Ken Adamany when Ken was on the drums. And the Steve Miller Band, who Steve was from Milwaukee, as I am. And then Rick Nielsen and the Grim Reapers. And then they changed their name to Cheap Trick. And they're kind of still around. Actually, all 3 of those groups are still around. And then the Mourning Days. And the Mourning Days are still around. And 3 of the groups are probably a little more famous than the other group. But the passion is still there for all the groups. And that's one of the big things that we have, I think, in the book that goes throughout the book is the passion of the Mourning Days and the continuing of Rick and Risa and Wayne and Bob, who aren't here right now this evening, continue to keep the book going. Okay, so that was 1968, and I left the group in 1970. I had actually been inducted into the service, but I lucked out because they came up with another draft back then where they threw all the 18 and 26-year-olds in. And I was lucky and didn't have to go. But our drummer, Steve Ellman, he wasn't as lucky, and he had to go. So basically, the original Mourning Days broke up in September 1970. And at the time, I was going to Milton College up here. And I had just gotten my degree in teaching, and I had a couple children, so I decided I'm going to leave the band, which was a really tough decision to make, and go on and teach school, which I did in Broadhead, which is not too far from here either, Broadhead, Wisconsin. Rick kept playing and going, and still going. And by the way, Risa, she didn't start till 1971, band. So the band keeps playing and playing, and all of a sudden in 2005, Rick calls me up. Well, we've been close friends ever since, from '65, but more like family actually, but he calls me up, he says, Doug, you won't believe this, I think I heard our Fly My Paper Airplane on this CD, and or saw it on the internet. I was Googling, and I said, let me check it out, Rick. So I checked it out, I ordered it, bought it, it came out of Florida from a place called Gear Fab Records. It was called Psychedelic States, Illinois, 1960s. I called the owner of the company, Gear Fab Records, Roger Maggio, and I said, you know, that's our song. Where did you get it? And he said, I don't know. I have these coming from all over the place. I make compilations of groups that made records that really didn't make it big, and I put them together in the same state. And I said, well, we're from Wisconsin. We're from Whitewater. And he says, oh, gee, it showed you recorded in Chicago. I just assumed you were from Illinois. No. So anyway, so he sent us a copy of this with the Fly My Paper Airplane on it. And so then I got talking, after I got it, I talked to him again, and he said, well, do you have any other record or any other songs and things that you recorded? And I said, no. I said, oh, wait, well, we did, actually. We have some original songs that we have, but they're on an old reel-to-reel tape. And here's another Janesville connection. This old tape that we did before we went to Chicago was recorded at Leaf Studio. And I don't know if I could find it. And does anybody know what I'm?
I've got a record from Leaf Studio.
Do you? Do you remember where it's a?
I do not.
It was a barn.
I never knew we had one in Janesville.
Yeah. It was out in the country, and this gentleman converted his barn to a studio. And it was a pretty nice studio.
What year?
This would have been 1967. And so anyway, I told Roger down in Florida, this is what we have. And he said, well, send it down to me, and I'll take one of those off because I'm going to make one for Wisconsin. And I'll take one of your songs and put it on for Wisconsin. I sent it down there, and it was in my basement for over 35 years. And anyway, he got a hold of it, and he decided not to take one song off, but he took all of them and made this CD for us. So this came out in 2007 called Lost Recordings. So this has all our original songs from 1960s on here. And if you buy the CD, they're $10, but there's two versions of Fly My Paper Airplane. And this is kind of neat too. The first one on here that shows up is the one recorded at Sound Studio in Chicago and Michigan Avenue. The one at the bottom is the same song, but was recorded at Leaf Studio. And then the ones just above it were recorded at Leaf Studio in Janesville. So there's a little history with that. So, okay, so anyway, 2005, I said, Rick, they found our 45. Now they put a CD together. You guys have been playing for over, at that point, it was over 45 years, or 45 years. We got to write a book. So 12 years later, last September, we got 307 pages of a cool, very cool story. And what we like, I think, about it so much, it's not a compilation of all these different groups and so on and so forth. It's one story about a band started in '65 right up to this date of, well, we're a few months behind now, but it takes us right up to September of 2017. And as Rick is our designated author on here, because Rick did probably 70, 80, 90% of the book, or 98% of the book, and the pictures and everything. So anyway, that's why we wrote the book. And I always have been saying that I could probably write a book on writing this book. It's an interesting story in itself. So, was that it, Rick, for that?
Well, I think one of the other things I think that'd be interesting for you to talk about, Doug, would be the teen bar scene and the impact that had on us and, in the area and bands in the area having places to play.
Being in Whitewater, depends what county you lived in back then. You know, if you lived in Walworth County, that was 21. Jefferson County was 18. Rock County was 21, right? Yeah. But out of the 72 counties in Wisconsin, over half of them were 18. When I'm saying 18, I'm talking about 18 beer bars. They only served beer and only had to be 18 years old. But every one of these bars, from here to, well, let's go up to Hurley and Hayward and Amory, had bands. And not just one night a week. They had from 2 nights to 3 nights, sometimes 5, 6 nights. And if you, you had that one slide on there where all the bands that Ken Adamany had, all those groups, the Tails and the Grim Reapers, who became the Cheap Trick, and Harvey Scale, yeah, all these bands here, including the, where are we here? Mourning Days. These were the bands that these bars wanted the most, basically, because Ken Adamany was the top booking agent in the Midwest, not only Wisconsin. And it became actually a circuit, you know. So we'd be playing, you know, in Oshkosh one night, maybe the next night in La Crosse, coming back to, if that's during the week, coming back to Whitewater at night, and then taking off on Friday and maybe playing 3 nights in Green Bay, Stevens Point, Wausau, Amory, Wisconsin, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. We got a story about that place regarding one of the bands that we worked with back then that made it famous, and that's where we were able to you know, do our thing and play our music, get paid for it, and bring us back. The first place that we played, and Dane County was 18. The first place that we played was at Nora's store on Highway 12 between Cambridge and Madison. First place we ever played and got paid. Was it 15? Yeah, was it 15 bucks a piece? That was 1965. That was very cool. So that was the big thing back then, and there was a lot of entertainment, and there was a lot of beer flowing. And all the, like Eau Claire was 18, that county, Eau Claire County, whatever county Stephen Point is in, those were in Brown County. Those are all. Milwaukee was not. Milwaukee was 21, and but you went up to Ozaukee County, to Port Washington, to the Old House or Weiler's, and we played in those places, and those were 18. And I don't know how much you want me to get into some of those bars, but just one quick. Okay, here's the difference between a kind of a soft, like maybe we'd call it a college bar now, and kind of what we called back then a greaser bar, which was like a rough bar. Okay, the Old House was kind of a college bar, and blah blah blah, and people are wearing sweaters and all that kind of stuff, and it was very nice, and everybody's behaved. Then we go to Weiler's, and whoop, sleeves are all cut off, and there's you get there, and the owner. Well, the first thing we noticed was there was like a chicken wire in front of the stage, and this seems a little different playing in this environment. Okay, and then so we started to get set up. We had to work our way around. We couldn't come forward. We had to go behind the stage, which was behind that was actually the beer room, where they kept their extra beer. And that wasn't a big treat because that was warm beer. And so we get all set up, and then the owner comes up and he says, "Now, when the fights break out, just keep playing. Don't." And we're sitting there, like, I'm sure we're gonna have a fight here, you know. He says, "Don't stop playing because that just makes it worse." So lo and behold, I don't know, about halfway through the set, these two guys literally took beer bottles, broke them on the stage, and went after each other. We just kept playing. And there were about 20 deputized. What they would do back then, in the big ballrooms like this, and like in around at the Corey in Neenah and Menasha, they would just deputize you for the night, and there'd be like in these big ballrooms, there'd be like 20 of these deputies. I mean, they didn't have guns on them, but they had badges. And they were the security, and so fights broke out, and boom, they'd take care of them, and so on and so forth. So we didn't go, they wanted us to come back, but we didn't actually go back to that place. We kind of started hanging out in Eau Claire University and places like that. So anyway, yeah, that's the theme bar thing.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the bands that Ken had and some of the impact they had on us.
Oh, okay.
I guess I want to let you know that Janesville had a pretty interesting music scene. I may not be telling you anything, but when I was a kid, we used to go out to the fairgrounds, and they would call it bandstand. And you go out and you watch some of the best groups around. They'd be playing out there, and everybody, the place was packed. That's just kind of the thing you did. Well, we had a situation occur where we needed a guitar player or a bass player, and Ken Adamani was booking us at that time. And he said, well, go check out this band. They're playing out at the fairgrounds, and maybe the guy in the band can work you guys can work something out with him, and he can help you out. So we went out to see the band play. It was a band called the Romans, and this was the band that Tommy Rowe and the Romans had a hit with Sheila. Sweet, you all know Sheila. Sweet little Sheila, you know her if you see her. Well, Tommy Rowe went on his own. The Romans went on their own, and they would play up here a lot with Ken Adamani. And the bass player in the band had agreed that he would fill in with us for a little bit. Well, that bass player ended up being Barry Oakley, who ended up being an Allman Brother, which he would. And I was just in heaven talking to this guy because he knew so much about the guitar. He knew a lot about the blues, and he didn't drink. That was just really weird for me to be around a musician that didn't drink and seemed to care about what he ate. It's just nobody I knew was doing that kind of thing. It's just, we were going to live forever and we can do whatever we want. But he really kind of kicked my head around, and it was always pretty thrilling to know that a couple years after that he went and was part of the Allman Brothers as they got together. A sidelight on that is a drummer that had worked with Reese and I for 5 years now works for a St. Louis Music, and one of their subsidiaries is Alvarez Yari Guitars. And our old drummer Bob just presented one of the Allman Brothers with a guitar that company had made. And it was Jack Pearson. You may know Jack. He's a great guitar player, lives in Nashville. And Bob told Jack about our book, and Jack said, I've got to have that book. So Jack Pearson, another Allman Brother, has our book. But that's a little Janesville connection. The other was, you had a band up here called the Bo Gentry. And I was introduced to the Bo Gentry through Sammy McHugh and the Legends. Because the drummer, Rick Jagger, in that group, I was at the gig when Rick filled in for the Legends for his first time. The Bo Gentry's claim to fame was, and some of you may know this, some not, that song by Norman Greenbaum, Spirit in the Sky. Well, the guitar player in Bo Gentry and the drummer were both on that recording. And they were in Janesville and hanging out here quite a while, which is pretty cool. The drummer, Rick Jagger, who just passed away maybe, 6-7 years ago, was a great drummer. He ended up playing with Dave Mason. Dave Mason, he was on the Split Coconut album. That was the album with Feeling All Right on there. A song we can't get Wayne to do anymore because he's tired of it, But he did that. He also backed up Crosby, Stills, and Nash. We were playing at Alpine Valley when they were out there, and Rick was playing drums for their group that night. And later in life, Rick would be playing drums on some of the live Bodine's recordings. Rick was just a great drummer, and he worked with Scotty, the sax player we had for a while. I remember he kept trying to teach Scott, what a shuffle was about. And I remember he came back to me after he heard Rick play, and he said, "Man, yeah, I see what you mean. That guy really knows how to play." And he did. He would make you a better musician by playing with him. But those are a couple of the interesting people that I think really came out of Janesville that may have passed you up if you weren't aware of those things. I wanted to be sure you were aware of them. Sam McHugh, if you knew Sammy, he was an amazing guitar player. Played on the early Everly Brothers records. Later on, he played on the Everly Brothers TV show, and Sam played around town an awful lot as well. So those are some very interesting Janesville connections that I've never forgotten. That are pretty influential. I think we. Maybe we should talk about like our band and some of our travels, some of the road work that we did.
With the groups?
Yeah.
Trashman?
Trashman.
Yes, see if Rick can find this clip. See if anybody can recognize this song. I already gave you a clue. I gave you the name of the band. So,
We got it, right?
anybody not ever heard this song? Well, it was just recorded. It was just recorded by the 7th band last year by the Radioactive Chickenheads, and I'm not making this up, but they redid it last year, and they're I guess they're supposed to be funny rock band. Anyway, yeah, that's true. So there's this, any people, I mentioned Amory, Wisconsin. Any people familiar where that is or about where it's at, up in northwest Wisconsin? Okay, it's not too far from Minneapolis, probably maybe an hour and a half drive. But Amory, Wisconsin is a small town in northwest Wisconsin, and their famous spot there, entertainment spot, was the Woodley Country Dam. And it was a huge hall. One half of the hall was a 21 bar, and the other half was an 18-year-old bar. We got to play in the side where the 18, where the beer bar was. The Trashmen were there, and this was 1967, and that did that song, and they were playing in the 21 side. We got talking to them during breaks. In 1962, this group called the Rivetones recorded this song, "The Bird is the Word." And then they came up with another song called "Oopa Mau Mau." And they would go and play at the Woodley Country Dam, and the Trashmen would play there, and they would, the Trashmen would see the Rivetones doing these songs. And then another time, another group came in called the Sorensen Brothers, and they were doing the same two songs. So this was in 62, and so in 63, the Trashmen, they're from Minneapolis, they decided they were going to take these two songs and make one song, and so they call it Surfin' Bird. And like I said, it's been since 1962. Well, they did the one song in 63. It's pre-recorded. Well, seven different times it's been recorded or covered by other groups. And not to mention a lot of commercials. It's been, if you pay attention sometimes to the commercials. So anyway, that's how it got going. But that one song, Surfin' Bird by the Trashmen, took them all the way, literally around the world. We played, when we were playing with them in 67, they had just got back from China. And they were just basically getting everything they could out of that song. So that was interesting. And a side story to that, John Valentine bought a piece of equipment from him called a Fender Reverb. And a reverb is what gives you the echo sound if you're using it for voice or if you're using it for your guitar. And the little box has a spring in it, and that's what causes the echo. But there's a bar that holds the spring together, so when you're traveling, the thing's not bouncing around in the car. Speaking of cars, the name of the band was Mourning Days, and if you saw any of the pictures up there, or if you get the book or have the book, one of the reasons we call it Mourning Days because we had a hearse that we traveled with a trailer, and we were coming back from Wausau about 3 in the morning one time, and decided to change our name. We were the Coachmen to begin with, but we found out there was another group called the Coachmen. That was a nice night or day there. That's me in the snow there, hooking up the trailer. There's better pictures of that, but so there was a band called the Coachmen, and we're saying we got to change our names. Okay, we're coming home. It's in the morning. We're driving our hearse. Let's call it Mourning. Let's not spell it M-O-R-N. Let's call it M-O-U-R-N. And we're kind of, at 3 in the morning, you're kind of in the daze, so let's just call it Days, but let's spell it a little different. So that's how we got the name. But anyway, going back to that little piece of equipment that John Valentine bought from the Trashman called the Reverb. John's so excited because he's got this thing now. His guitar's going to sound really cool. We get on. We go to the next job. I guess it was the fog cutter in Kenosha.
Whitewater.
Oh, Whitewater. Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah. And we're all set up on stage, and we're playing. And it comes to John's part with to get that reverb sound, and he's banging on the guitar, and it's not coming out. He looks at the little box, and he's shaking it, and it's not coming out. And he finally, I guess he had to be there, but he kicked it. He kicked this little box. And Rick and I just happened to turn and look at him at the same time. And John was just frustrated. Rick walks over, bends down, moves the little bar on the box, and John gets his reverb, and he's all happy there. So that was our piece of equipment that we bought from the Trashman and the Surfing Bird. So then okay, here we go, Janesville. 1967, the #1 song in the country was Yummy, 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 Lovin' My Tummy. Have you heard of that? Called By the Ohio Express. That's another one that was used in commercials. I don't know if it was Alka-Seltzer or what it was. But they played in Janesville at the Meadows, and we were the opening group for them. And they had #1. Folks remember Look magazine, and they would always have they'd always feature a picture on the inside cover of Look magazine. Well, they had an old VW. Well, it wasn't old then, but it was a VW bus van, and they had painted it paisley. So their #1 record, Yummy, Yummy, Yummy. They've got this paisley van in Look magazine. They're playing in Janesville. Ken Adamany, he set us up with this. And now we're getting into what they called the bubblegum era. We weren't bubblegum, but the bands that we were opening for were bubblegum. And Ohio Express was one of these. And they were from Ohio, out of Buddha Records. And these two gentlemen, S.A., started this Buddha company, Super S Productions. So we get up and we do our set. And it's time for the Ohio Express to come. And we thought, well, there's going to be, 15, 20 minutes. They got to get their stuff set up. And they come up and say, is it okay if we use your equipment? Ours was stolen. Well, what are you going to say? Yeah, that's fine. So they did. And we exchanged sets. And they didn't sound too good. In fact, they sound pretty bad. And we have the article somewhere from the Janesville Gazette talking about how well we played compared to them. Okay, so that's fine. So down the road, Ken Adamany sits up with another bubblegum group in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, at the Cow Palace. The band's called The Music Explosion. And they had the #3 record in the country called A Little Bit of Soul. And you don't have these, do you have any more of these clips or no? Yeah. Okay. And so we got talking to them, and they knew the Ohio Express, and we told the Music Explosion, you know, the guys, they said their equipment was stolen, so they had to use our equipment. Their equipment wasn't stolen. They don't have any equipment. They just travel around like this. Well, there's a little bit of soul. Yeah. And that got up at the top. In fact, if you listen to, there's a Fidelity commercial out on TV now, and if you listen carefully, they're playing that song in the background. So he says, no, no, they didn't do that. They just traveled like that. They didn't have. So, okay, that's fine. So that night we go out for breakfast. You know, back then, the only place you could eat was a truck stop. You know, you didn't have these 24-hour McDonald's and all this. Well, yeah, I guess there was a McDonald's then, but they didn't have. You couldn't eat anywhere. You had to eat at a truck stop. So we were eating on the truck stop at Highway 41, and of course we all have long hair, and it's about 2 in the morning after we all packed up our stuff, and we walk in, and the truckers are all. Most of them are at the counter because they're by themselves, so they don't like to sit in booths. And we walk in, and of course they all start whistling at us. You know, okay. So we sat down. We took up 3 booths. I don't know. There was 8 or 9 of us between the 2 groups. And one of the members of the Music Explosion, he walked up over to the jukebox, played their song on the jukebox. Was #2 in the nation. He came back and sat down. We just kept talking. And another one. You might have had to be there again for that one, but it was pretty cool. Okay, so this thing with the Ohio Express even got more interesting, because there was these groups were out of like Mansfield, Ohio, and Columbus, Ohio, and the Lemon Pipers, Music Explosion. Lemon Pipers had the green tambourine, and it turned out that the Ohio Express they were doing these songs that they had live, but they weren't making the record. There were studio musicians back in Ohio making these, there's Yummy Yummy, making these records. One of the studio musicians, that's good. One of the studio musicians was in a group called the Measles. And then he later joined the James Gang. And from the James Gang, he was a member of the Eagles. I think you've heard of the Eagles, probably. Maybe the James Gang. Joe Walsh, yeah. Joe Walsh was singing, playing guitar, and doing keyboards in these backgrounds for these bubblegum, because they were all coming out of the same place in Ohio. So the Ohio Express, they weren't even making these records, but they were out and about, to the point where the producer and writer, Joe Devine, was writing these songs and making them up. He had the studio musicians like Joe Walsh putting them together. The band, Ohio Express, is out on the road with #1 song, Yummy, 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 and then they come up with this other song, Chewy, Chewy, Chewy. and that became #5, while Yummy, Yummy was #1. So Ohio Express goes to their next job, and these people play Chewy, Chewy, Chewy. They couldn't play it. They didn't even know the song. But they were dead. So it was the whole bubblegum machine coming out of Ohio was interesting. And the other one, as I mentioned, was the Lemon Pipers, and we opened up for them, and that was '67 too at the Dane County Fairgrounds. And again, Joe Walsh did a lot of the background studio musician work for them. And these guys, they were interested in blues, and they got talked into making this bubblegum song. Well, of course, it came #1 again in the nation, and they sold millions of records, but they didn't really like to play it. They wanted to do blues. So we opened for them at the Dane County Fairgrounds for the fair. We did our thing. They got up, and they started playing this heavy blues, and the kids were, and they were kids, because the bubblegum attracted the 12 to 16 or 15 olds. And so they're hitting. So finally, they start playing their song, Green Tambourine, and they started off. It sounded really nice. They got about halfway through it, and they just started chopping up on it and hitting and you know, feedback, hitting the blues, and the kids were ticked off. And again, we were rotating sets, and the kids were coming up to us. Are you guys going to play again? I said, yeah, we're playing again. Said, oh, thank God, you know. And so anyway, that's some of those. And then we opened for the New Colony 6 out of Chicago, and we opened for CTA. They changed the Chicago Transit Authority. They got in trouble with the Chicago Transit Authority, Chicago, so they just changed their name to Chicago. They're still around. They're doing well. And the Mods, their song was Hold On.
The cover of Hold On, I'm Coming.
Hold On, I'm Coming. The Mods. Yeah. We've opened for them in Rhinelander and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so we had lots of great experiences playing with big time groups, which was really fun for us. But back to our own group was kind of short lived. Like Doug was saying, the draft lottery was in place. That was the reason our band broke up. Our last gig was up at the White Hare in Madison. And it was a real tough night for me because I was losing my best friends. I started when I was 15, and I was losing them all in the blink of an eye. You know, the next day they're all going to be gone, from musical life anyway. And after that night, I decided, well, I wanted to keep this thing going. I was not ready to kind of cash it. And we were a trio at that time. Doug was playing bass, I was on guitar, Steve was drumming and singing, and we were a pretty happening little group right then. You know, we had a great summer traveling throughout the country. But I needed to put a new band together. I was going to school in Whitewater at the university. My mom and dad, Reese's and my mom and dad were absolutely the backbone of our band and the reason we were able to play as long as maybe we even have, I guess. They really kind of supported us in every aspect of our musical career. And I look back at it now just how lucky we were to have parents who let us do that. You know, I thought all parents were like that. I didn't know. I thought that's just what parents do. They support and they love their kids. You know, they bust their butts to make them happy and to try to let them live out their life. I didn't realize that wasn't the way life really was. And the older I get, the more I see, the more blessed I realize. So we really, really have been. But my mom, who got around, she was a waitress, and she loved talking to people. I was kind of more interested in how to play that guitar. You know, that's really what's driven me throughout life. And she was letting people know we needed a band, we needed a bass player. Well, my 7th grade math teacher happened to be married to Bob Jensen's sister. And he said, you know, my brother-in-law is coming out of the Navy, and he's looking for a band to play with. I said, well, put him in contact with us, and which he did. Bob came on over and auditioned. And I said, oh, man, we can't have Bob. No, that's not going to work. That'll never work. We kept auditioning other bass players. Well, it ended up Bob was the guy. And it wasn't because maybe Bob had the technical chops, but Bob had the feel. You know, he had the feel for it, which has an awful lot to do with playing music a lot more than chops sometimes. And he had the desire. He really wanted to do it. So that's how we met Bob. And we've been playing off and on together for over 45 years. Bob used to work at a hair studio here in Janesville. Bob was with us that first 3 years when we were playing 6 nights a week at Gensler's, and he'd go to the beauty shop the next morning. We'd always tell his customers, you know, be sure you're not the first one in the morning to get those bangs cut, man. Unless you want the wave. But we played for a couple years as a trio, and a good friend of mine from high school was on drums. I realized after those couple years we needed more pizzazz. I did not have any stage pizzazz. I didn't have that kind of charisma you really need to be successful playing rock and roll. So I thought, let's get a girl in the band. That'd be really cool. It'd give us a chance to do more material, different material, and it would give us a look, a little sparkle on stage. So I auditioned a couple ladies and had a couple pass through the band that were pretty good, but they didn't last for a variety of reasons. And finally, we thought, well, we'll let Risa tell the story from here as to how Risa came to be part of the band.
Well, as you can tell, the name of the book is Garage Band, and they used to practice in my parents' garage. My dad actually refurbished it, put carpets on the walls so it wouldn't bother the neighbors, and cemented the floor so it would be nice and quiet. But I would listen to these girls audition, and I'd stand outside the barn and I'd check them out. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, that girl can't sing. Oh, that girl's got no soul. And so then my day did come to audition. So I go to the barn. I mean, there's the barn, there's my parents' house, and my brother and I are still living in my parents' house. So I walk like 30 seconds, and I'm in the barn. And I sing my song, and it's Heart of Gold, Neil Young. It was the chorus. It was actually 8 words and like 5 notes. And then he looks at me, and he goes, "We'll call you." So I leave the barn, I take my 30 seconds back to the house, and I go, "Mom, Dad, he said he's going to call me." So, but then that was my introduction to the group. So
Very professional.
yeah, and they can't get rid of me yet, so that's good. Yeah, one story I have to tell because my sister's here with her daughter Rachel. When these guys would play, I was 12 years old, and they would practice in my mom's living room. Renee was just a baby, literally months old.
She was 2 months old when I met her.
2 months, I know. And they'd be practicing, and they'd be doing Zeppelin, and the windows would be rattling, and we'd be covering our ears. And my sister would be upstairs in her crib, just sleeping away, just sound asleep. And then they'd be gone. And then the next day, I'd come home from school, and I'd close the door, and my mom would go, "Quiet, the baby's sleeping." It's like, but my sister was a real trooper, and she sings too, and so does her daughter, and their husband's musical too. We just love it. It's a good musical family. But I always wanted to sing. I knew in 4th grade, I would always sing on my way to school. I'd sing in school. The teacher would say, "Well, if you're going to sing, sing for everybody." And then I'd go, "No, I can't do that. Too bashful." But I sing loud. I wasn't real pretty. I wasn't a real pretty singer. I was kind of get the force in there, and I still enjoy it. I do love Patsy Cline. I still do Patsy Cline for my dad. I do Kitty Wells for my dad. I do Portugal the Man for Rachel and Roland. So they keep us. We have these young people that keep us up to date. And Dido, we do some Dido, and Adele. We like Adele, and like I said, Bruno Mars. They're always amazed that we do this new material, and it's good because we do play to a wide variety of ages in our audiences. I mean, we actually get the little ones, the 4-year-olds, they're always boogieing, hey, if we can get them to dance, we're okay. But those kids, they get on their phones. We actually have people on our dance floor on their phones, dancing with their phone. But you do a new song, or you do something that they're familiar with, or that their parents were familiar with, and they'll always kind of give you an eye, like, "What are you doing playing my music?" It's like, but you can get their attention, and then to listen to something else, and just passion about music and people and connecting and eye to eye, and it's a good thing. So, and he can't get rid of me. Nope. Like we were in WGN on the radio, and Mr. Kogan asked me, "Well, what year did you start?" I said, "I started in 71. He just started laughing. He goes, "Oh, only 71. It's like, yeah, only 71.
I think some of the other something else you might enjoy, we'd like to hear about, Reese, is what we traveled. We were on the road. We didn't travel year in and year out, but we got the audition at Alpine Valley. We were working there during the winters, the summers to begin with. Then we got the winter gig, and again, we did that for 28 years. But we also traveled a lot. We traveled throughout the United States, and it was Risa and 3 other guys. I thought you might like to talk about that a little bit. There had to be some interesting experiences there.
And Canada.
Yep, and Canada. Well, it was different. Like 3 of the guys, 2 of them smoked cigarettes. Well, I have asthma, so I wasn't going to stay in a room with my brother or with a smoker. So I was usually stayed with Vaughn, our bass player, but he liked sardines. And sardines they're just the worst. So I'd make him like go outside. So then we were in Montana and it was like -20. And he snuck in the bathroom and had the window open just to eat his sardines. But he was very nice about it. Yeah, these guys, we'd be out in Montana and they'd say, no further beyond this point, and all 3 of them would keep going out there in the wild, and then we would be camping, and of course the girl would have to cook. You know, I have to do those girl things. It's a line between a girl musician, boy musician. Sometimes you're just a musician. You're not female or male. You're just musician, and you play music, and that was good. Alpine was quite an experience. I know we're both going to talk about that. Rubbing elbows with famous people, you know. We'd be the lounge band. We'd be sitting there and going outside, listening to the big guys out there in the pavilion. We'd listen to Johnny Cash, Frank Sinatra, Chuck Berry, Hart, Madonna, Cher, the Eagles, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and there'd be thousands and thousands of people screaming, and then we'd be going back into the lounge, and there'd be like 2 people. And it was kind of disheartening, but then after the event, they'd all come down. And once in a while, the stars would come, and they would come and see us, and they'd actually listen. And sometimes they would want to be us. They didn't like that big stage because you couldn't look at anyone in the eye. You couldn't talk to anyone person to person. And that was kind of sad. Or they're members of their band. Oh, I'm not sticking with this band. I'm making my own band. I got my own music. I got my own thing. So they weren't really part of the band either. And it was just kind of sad. I did have a couple offers to go to California from Sha Na Na. They said, come on with us to California. We'll make you a star. It's like, oh, yeah, right. And then Doobie Brother, he whispered in my ear. I was playing a left-hand bass like the Doors, you know, and he just loved my left hand. He said I was very steady. And then Cher, she was on my dance floor, and she looked right at me, and I quit singing. I couldn't help it. It was like I was a fan. But it was quite an experience. I'll let Rick tell some more stories.
I think one other story you really should tell is that the story about the agent, Risa, that was interested in you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's they would enjoy hearing this story.
Well, I got that off. I was offered many times to, you always want to be a star. You always want to be famous, and whatever that means. So one time I actually said yes. And I went, and the guy put me up in an apartment above a strip club. That was the first check. So then we sat down and we talked about it a little bit. And he goes, well, let's see. Do you have any contacts? And I go, at that time I did. I knew a producer from London. I knew people in New York, LA. I knew a lot of people. And he goes, no. He goes, eye contacts. He wanted a sex symbol. He wanted somebody to wear sexy clothes and be an image up there. And then I knew it just wasn't going to work. But I did try it. I did try it for 2 months. And my first gig, I had to have my brother come and save me musically. And he helped my band sound good. But my first gig, my drummer fell in love and quit. My second gig, my bass player, we got a call at 2 in the morning. He was nude with 3 girls in the pool. And then 2 months later, we had a car accident in the mountains of Montana. I broke my leg. My husband broke his leg. And we were off the road. And that was my sign from God that says, get off the road. This isn't for you. Go back to Wisconsin. And keep playing music and keep singing. Yeah.
It's all in the book, by the way.
While we were on the road and we were traveling, we were working full time. I really had our band working like full-time musicians. We rehearsed every day we could. We would go into the clubs and work. In our rooms, we'd be working on music. I mean, we were doing that constantly to keep our chops up. When we worked Alpine Valley, we were working there sometimes 4 or 5 nights a week, often 3 in their later period when Alpine began to slow down a little bit. We would take all our equipment home at night. Say if we'd be finished up on a Sunday, we had a matinee, we're done at 7. We'd pack up everything we had, take it home. If we had to play, and we would be back there on Wednesday, we'd take everything home, set up at home again, and rehearse some tunes to play the next week, and take it all back up and set it up again. We did that forever. I mean, everybody that I played with really worked hard at trying to keep their chops together. And we always tried to be fresh, new, and tried to be ourselves, playing music that we liked, that I always felt if we couldn't get excited about what we were doing, how the dickens are we going to get anybody else excited about what we're doing? And so we were all over the map musically, but we always rehearsed a lot. I was really driven by, I still am. I love playing the guitar. I love music. But the guitar itself has always been just this wonderful friend I've had for life. That's been a challenge every time you get to a level, you know, you think, oh, maybe I've got it. Well, then, like everything else in life, you realize, oops, it just means you've got another level to go. You feel like a beginner again. And then you keep learning, and it's so much fun. But we did that forever. Currently, with our band, we use a drum machine. And I do sequencing for it. I've been a real nut about rhythm. To me, rock and roll without a good drummer is worthless. You know, it's just the backbone of it. And no matter how good everything else is, without a good drummer, you don't have the rhythm and the groove to get people moving. We're real lucky to have 2 really good singers with the group. I'm going to introduce Wayne Scow, even though Wayne's not here. I had hoped. There were a lot of musicians in town in Janesville I've worked with that they just aren't here tonight for one reason or another. I found out tonight that one of them's in Alaska, Aaron Story. But I want to tell you how I met Wayne Scour. Reese and I met Wayne. I'd heard about this band Stonehenge, and they were playing in the area a lot, and they were really had quite a good reputation. And so Reese and I and Bob Lee, our drummer, we said, let's go see them play. They were playing at a club in Milton. It was a long, narrow bar right downtown. And I walked into the bar, and then these guys were playing. And I sit back, listen to them, and said, wow. And I looked at Wayne and said, man, that guy can really sing, you know. And Steve Showers, the keyboard player, I talked with him most of the break, but Wayne made a real impression on me. And maybe 2-3 years later, we were playing in Edgerton with Dan Riley, and Dan had a group called the Barn Swallows, and I was a Barn Swallow. And it was the kind of a group where different people were always kind of, if somebody was around, had an instrument, they were always welcome to play. And one day Wayne came. And he was going to sing with the group. It was a Sunday afternoon out at the Racetrack Park. And that's how I met Wayne, got to talk with him. and he's just a wonderful singer. He's I mean, no reason Wayne couldn't be, as Risa couldn't be on the national stage if they choose. But there was a point where Bob Jensen was playing bass. I had a drummer and myself. We had a trio at Alpine, and I just couldn't sing anymore. I was singing all night long. This for a couple of years. Risa wasn't with us at the time. And we needed a singer, and thought, well, let's try Wayne, see if he'd like to do it. And Wayne came and said, yeah, he'd sing Saturday nights with us. That was about it, though. Anymore. So he did, and slowly Wayne came and became a regular member of the band. And as Jerry often likes to say, Wayne's the newest member of the band. He's been with them about 25 years. And if you ever have had the chance to hear Wayne, he's again a terrific talent. We're lucky to have him. The whole one other group from Janesville. I know you're familiar with this, probably Duck Soup. Lance Massey's group. Lance also played with the Bo Gentry. I first heard Lance play with Dan at that Anchor Inn gig, and later on did some recording with Lance, and he's a terrific musician. I'm going to turn it over to Doug, because maybe Doug can talk about Rock County Guitar and Dick Zastro a little bit.
Yeah, back in the 70s, I mentioned I started teaching school in Broadhead, but I left the Mourning Days, but I didn't leave the musician part of it. In fact, since then I've been in, I think it was 6 different groups. Now I haven't played for, well, it's 10 years now. I haven't had a group, but I live in Baraboo, and I had 2 groups there, the Myrtle Moon Pickle and C. Monty Band. We did a lot of work right in Baraboo and at Ho-Chunk. But anyway, in the when I got to Broadhead, I wanted to get a band going right away, even though I was teaching. So I got the junior high teacher, and I got the senior high music teacher, both music teachers, and we started a little group, and well, whatever. They were fine, but not into rock and roll. And then somehow or other, I went to the music store in Janesville here. I think I had to get some strings or something, and I got talking to Dick Zastro, the gentleman on the right there, who owned the store. And we just got talking, and he was saying, well, he's looking for a bass player or another guy to play. So we started a trio, and then we got Tom James, I believe. Yeah, Tom. And we call it the TJ Trio. So I got to work with Dick Zastro for a couple of years. And what he's holding there is not just a guitar, it's called the Gitorgan. And that was the first time I had seen one of those, and he had some buttons on there that he could make it sound. He could play the notes and chords, but make it sound like an organ on the guitar. It was called the Gitorgan. So that was kind of neat, and that was different. I know Rick came to see us a couple times, and then Rick ended up teaching guitar down the road, I think, which is literally down the road, I guess. Here it's across the bridge where it used to be his store. And that was my introduction, and meeting Dick was a very, very nice man.
And what that did for me, just to show you how these wonderful connections in life kind of occur, I was teaching at Rock County Guitar. I taught there for a couple of years. That place closed. And then the owner and I went to a Music Mart, and I taught there for a year. Well, within that year, the night that Cher was at Alpine Valley, I met my wife-to-be, and I was going to get married. I was going to get off the road and I'd get married. But to do that, I needed to get a real job, and this was just like killing me, man. This was like, I couldn't. I don't know how I did it. But anyway, when I went to University of Whitewater, I graduated as social worker. but I never worked. I just interned. I said, last thing in the world I want to be is a social worker. So for 11 years, I didn't do anything with that degree. I needed a job, and the wonderful man who owned Rock County Guitar, when the person from the facility I was looking to get a job, they called to get some references, gave her such wonderful references that she said, I couldn't help but give you a shot, give you a chance. So truly grateful, but that would never happen if Doug wouldn't have met Dick, and I wouldn't have ended up teaching there. I mean, all those wonderful connections happened, and so I've been forever, ever grateful for that. Back to Alpine. One thing I'd like to let everybody here know about being a musician. If you ever, maybe you gigged yourself, or you've known somebody who has. Some of the great experiences I've had, and they've been many, but one that I enjoy telling people is the night I met Graham Nash at Alpine. We were playing. We had maybe it was a small crowd, maybe 75 people there. But Graham was sitting from maybe the other side of the room to where I am, watching us play a set. He's just sitting there watching the whole set. Oh, this is pretty cool. It's Graham Nash over there. Hey, yeah. And we got done with our set. He comes walking up to me. He says, hey, you guys sound pretty good, And so we started talking. We talked the whole break. And the thing he told me during that conversation we had, he said, and I'd heard this from many other musicians as well. He said, you guys know how lucky you are? He says, you know how lucky you are? He says, you are really, living this rock and roll dream. You're able to pursue it the way you choose. He says, that's something I can't do anymore. People expect things from me. He says, you've got so much to be proud of doing what you're doing and doing it the way you're doing it. Don't feel you haven't made it, And what he's saying is just do your thing, whatever it is, whatever you're doing, do it and do it to the best of your ability. Is what I took away from that, and it was a wonderful experience. But that's probably one of my favorite stories to tell from Alpine. While the Mourning Days had broke up for a while, after Risa had an accident out in Wyoming, Wyoming, I remember these things because I saw the accident. She was right in front of me, and this car was coming over a hill. It was in the fall. It had snowed on top of a little hill or a foothill, and the car was pulling a trailer. The trailer smashed into the front of their van, and I saw every bit of it. And I said, "Oh my God, I'm gonna have to go look at that mess." Thank heaven they were okay. But when I came back, I needed work. Bob Jensen and I found I was backing up a jazz singer, Sally Eggleston, for a while. Sally wanted me to go to England with her. I said, no, Sally, I do not want to go to England with you. She's very good, but it wasn't something I chose. She worked with Richard Davis and did a lot. She's really quite good. But I wanted to play in a band. I like the groove thing. And anyway, I played with a band in Janesville called Sleeper. Yeah. One of my good friends was their bass player, and they needed a guitar player. And he asked me to come, and I did. I played with him for a couple weeks, and then I was replaced by Freddie Dobbs of Hartfield. He wasn't sure at that time whether he was going to play with him or not, but Freddie came and gigged with him. But through that meeting, I met some wonderful friends: Aaron Story, Steve Doherty, Jerry Lear, Mike Atkinson. Mike Atkinson is Chuck Hedges' nephew. Jerry, the guy on the left, is an outstanding bass player. Steve Doherty played with us, and Jerry did for about five years at Alpine Valley. Jerry, not that whole time. But we just saw Jerry. We did a program recently. I did a live performance last 2 weeks ago at a library. And Jerry came to see us play. Hadn't seen him in about 25 years. Good to see him. He bumps into Alan Luckett. Alan, who's been instrumental in keeping the band on top of things here. There's a picture of us again. But through that band, through Sleeper, that kind of helped keep Mourning Days going through meeting Steve and Jerry. And Aaron's just been a great friend. We see him on occasion. Tom Mcdermott's also from Janesville. Tom has played with us. Tom gave me a ring. It's a Cubs World Series ring. I brought it here just in case he'd be here tonight. It's a Cubs World Series ring. And the reason he gave me that ring is because he used to be a Cubs fan, but he said he was not a dedicated Cub fan because he gave up on him. But Tom was with us for only a short period of time. It's just been a great friend of the band. It's another picture of a band that was at Alpine Valley with Steve Doherty on drums. The guy in the blue jacket is Bob Berlin. Bobby, sax player. He's the guy. That guy's the one responsible for teaching me how to sequence drums. So if any of you wonder why we use those, every break, we were playing 6 nights a week. Every break, he would teach me how to sequence and operate the computer. He was just a terribly patient and a wonderfully talented player. And well, I guess I'll pass it over to Risa. You must have something to say, huh?
Well, we're going back to, again, why is there a book? Well, like I said, Rick's been in a band for 53 years. That's been the most attraction when we go to these radio stations and newspaper articles and libraries. Like, marriages don't stay together for 53 years. You don't have a job for 50. You don't stay in a house for 53 years. So how come? And we get it all the time. Why are you still together? Why do you still play music? Why don't you quit? You know, you're not a star. You're not going, you're not going to, So that's why there's a book. To kind of answer some of those questions. Why are we still here? And why do we still do what we do? And we'd like to thank you all for coming. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
Why don't I can pass the mic so we can have everybody hear the question so it can get recorded as well.
What years were you playing Alpine Valley as the house band?
We opened up, we played for the grand opening of Alpine's Rathskeller in 1972. And we played up till 2000. 2000 was our last season there. But Alpine had changed. Alpine was changing. The crowds had diminished. When we would play there on a Sunday afternoon, there would be 5,000 people there. And there were a couple thousand people there, 2,000-3,000 every night. And the lounge was a bit quiet until 11 o'clock when they closed those slopes. And once those slopes were closed, they just poured into that lounge. And it was a great place to play because people weren't there simply to drink. I mean, people were there to do things. They were there to ski, number one, They were there and then party. So it wasn't just that we were playing for people that just wanted to drink. I mean, which can be kind of tough sometimes. But yeah, it was a healthy group, and a lot of fun. A lot of fun. We met lots of stars. That was amazing. Yes, sir. Question?
I have another question.
Yeah.
The lounge you're talking about, that was upstairs, correct?
It was upstairs, yes.
Now, my thought was that was not open to the public at all.
That is. It was open, yeah. Absolutely. There were 3 bars up there.
I was up there.
Okay, 3 bars. The restaurant was up there, and part of the motel.
I had hospitality passes when the Rolling Stones played there.
Okay, sure.
And I was upstairs there, and it was by invitation only. There was no crowd up there.
Okay. On occasion, there was one room that they would close like that on occasion. It very well could have been it, yeah. But, from that lounge, we could see Fleetwood Mac when they would bring in their helicopters, getting out and going to the stage, and it was just always out there on the golf course, yeah, yeah. We were there when the weekend Stevie Ray was his chopper went down. It was some horrible things like that. I remember Rob Ferret. I don't know if you listen to Central Time on WPR, but Rob was asking the other day about somebody's favorite Space Invaders moment, and the one I remember most is Rich Little was at Alpine Valley, and he came down to the bar after his show, and he asked, and Space Invaders had just come out, and he was asking one of the bartenders, "Hey, can you show me how to play this game?" He says, "I hear you're pretty good at it." And he and this guy, they were just standing there by the machine, slugging quarters in it, playing Space Invaders. Alice Cooper, when his group was out there, I remember him coming in the bar saying, "Hey, I want to play golf in the mornings. Anybody need any extra person, to fill out a foursome?" Just terrific stuff. The Doobie Brothers, they loved Alpine. They would play softball out there. They would vacation out there, spend 4 or 5 days out between gigs, and they would be playing softball. They'd come in the bar and say, "Hey, Phil, we need somebody to play baseball with us, softball with us. Come on out, play left field. Will you play with us?" The band Chicago did the same thing. You really began to see that the star factor was not much. It was really the people factor that is really what mattered, because the people who were stars, there were a lot of them that were just good people first. You wouldn't even know they were stars, and there were a fair amount of people who just lived in their egos too and thought they were God's gift to us all, but you wouldn't really want to hang with them. If you may be interested for a moment or two, but beyond that, you probably wouldn't want to really spend a whole lot of time with them. But yeah, been an interesting run, and the friendships like Doug and I. We even though we stopped playing for 5 years, we are as
Adopted brother.
really, and your bandmates become like that. They just do. Our drummer was with us a couple of weeks ago. We were up in Wausau. We'd been invited up there to do their library. It was like we'd always been together. It's just great stuff, and to be lucky to be able to work with Risa as long as I have. It's been good stuff. Been good stuff, yeah. And now again with Bob and Wayne, we'd hope they'd be here, but they weren't able to make it. Yeah. But yeah, Doug.
It looks like we're getting near the end here. I just wanted to obviously plug the book one more time and the CD, and they're for sale tonight here in a few minutes. There's $20 and $10 for this, but this article here, this was just done in May, and here's Barry Adams from the Wisconsin State Journal did this, and here's the band in action. This one down here was done in April. This was the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and they did an article. Risa had mentioned we were on WGN. We've been having fun this year. This is our 6th presentation, library presentation. Thursday night we're going to be in South Milwaukee, my hometown, and after this article came out, the Associated Press picked it up, and this one's gone nationwide now. It went from the Seattle Times all the way to Washington, D.C., the Houston Chronicle, to Minneapolis, St. Paul, Tribune, Star. So we're trying to get the story out. We like talking. We could talk for hours about the story. We probably could have put another 100 stories in the book, but we think we've captured quite a few, and then with the DVD in the back, that helps it come along too. So there's a lot of pictures. I think it's a pretty quick read. So if you're interested, and right now we're in the process, because the book has gotten the publicity, we're trying to we're looking for a literary agent, as they say, to help us get our story out and get them to know the Mourning Days and come on up and see them in Edgerton and Newville and Lake Koshkonong and Whitewater. Yeah, so, thank you.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
In high school, they wanted me to take voice lessons, but like I said, all those girls, they all sounded alike. Like even today, you hear. Thank you. We were asked about voice lessons. I was offered voice lessons when I was in high school, but all the girls, when they took them, they all sounded alike. And even today, you find so many girl singers, you can't distinguish who they are. So I did not. But I did take organ lessons when I was little, and then I couldn't rock and roll. I tried to switch to piano, and I was just so stiff and just stuck. So I did take piano lessons at a university in Whitewater, UWW, and kind of loosened me up a little bit. But I don't need voice lessons.
I never argue with her.
Any other questions?
Who's the guy with the white hair sitting next to
Oh, it's true. What do
Who are
you do?
you?
Who are you? What do you do?
I am the world's oldest roadie. I'm the guy that carries the equipment in and out. And then I get to sit there and watch them for 4 hours as they play.
And he's married to me.
You've just been doing that a couple of years, right?
Yeah, just
40?
40.
Thank you all for coming. We sure appreciate you supporting music, supporting the library. And thank you, Phil, and thank you, Alan, for having us.